because if they sit there and get dripped on, by the time you get to them, they'll be hardened. Okay, so kind of keep those out of the way. So we're going to start with the head. And you know, when you made it, you did head, shoulders, arms, and down. It's going to work best if you actually plaster it that way. So we'll start at the top. As far as the head, right now it's not going to look like a skull. It's just going to be flat and have a little webbing of plaster over it, and that's all you need. Okay, we'll come in and make it more three-dimensional later. So just like George Siegel did in the video, you're going to dip this in and squeegee it. Okay, get the excess water out. And where I held on to that, it was still dry, so I'm just going to kind of liquefy the plaster on it. And then for the head, again, this is just going to wrap around. Now, some of you, after seeing this, and when we do the arms and so forth, you may decide that you need to tear some of your pieces in half. Now, we do want this, you know, we're not trying to give it much of a shape here. So just keep folding and controlling this. And that's modeling, you know, when you can manipulate your material like that. And then you do smooth it. Okay, so that's what you'll end up with for the head. And again, it's going to be fairly flat. We're not really trying to give it three dimension yet. All right, so now we'll do an arm. Typically the arms will go up to the neck. So the shoulders kind of get done automatically. So we want this to just drape over like that. Okay, it needs to touch the wet piece before it, so there isn't a gap. And it's just hanging over like this. Okay, then you're going to go ahead and kind of wrap that around and conform it to that armature. Now this is where we said, you know, don't think you're going to change the shape of that wire armature. This is just going to sit on top of it. Okay. So one side comes around, the other kind of stays in place. It's going to be real important that you work this to get it as smooth as possible. Now at first it's going to want to move all over the place. I mean, it's wet, it's slimy. But once it starts stiffening up a little bit, you've got a window of, you know, a little bit of time, a minute or so, you know, to then sort of start shaping things. Now, for some of you where this is, you know, maybe one arm's longer than the other, you know, this is where you can kind of control that, how you place your plaster. Okay, so we're going to give this a minute. Now, some people take the plaster piece and they try to wrap it this way. And we want to avoid that because then it looks like a mummy. And you've got these spirals going around it, and it's too textured that way. It's too hard to like draw on it for the bones and so forth. Okay, so we're going to let that sit. So that's what we have at this point. And if you look here and on the back side, you know, it's attached to the piece I put on before. Okay, as opposed to little segments. All right, the other arm. Now, depending on your pose, it might get a little tricky. You know, this arm's up in the air, so we're going to let it touch the shoulder, and again, we're just draping it over. And then I can swing, actually this may be a little easier than the other arm. Swing this around, and we've much got it. Those strings, you're better off just working them in. Now the reason we had you tear all these first is once your hands get wet and you handle much of that, again, wherever you touch it, even in the tearing process, it would start hardening. So by the time you got to those pieces, there would be hard chunks to them. So it's better to get prepared with it before you start. Okay. Now, if you get a piece on and it just won't do what you want it to, just take it back off immediately and either try it a second time, or if you decide you get a piece, and I don't think I will, but you get a piece and you decide, oh, it's too big, just toss it aside. Get a new one. We have plenty of plaster. If you squeegee a piece and you try to put it on the arm or the leg or whatever and you decide it's not big enough, And again, it just kind of goes to nothing in your hand. Again, just toss it aside and get a new piece, okay? Now, I want to come back to this arm because now it's kind of at a stage where it's going to hold its shape pretty well, and I can do a little more smoothing on it, okay? So there are, you know, kind of points, and you do want to make sure the wire's covered. I have wires showing back here. So you can run into all kinds of little things that it's good to kind of re-inspect what's there. Okay, so again, in the front, this slightly touches, and in the back, I'm gonna work on that a little bit, pull that over a little bit, okay? For the chest area, we're doing just like the head. All we're gonna do is just put a piece over it. You'll probably have to use 2 pieces, one in the front, one in the back. So again, let it touch all of this. I'm going to put this slightly at a diagonal. I think it will fit better. And I'm just going to fold it over in the back. And it'll touch the front side. So you're trying to manipulate something that's wet, very flexible, but at least you've got your armor, you know, that takes. So again, that's why we got to rely on it for a support. And then same thing for the hips and the legs. And typically our proportion, there we go. Again, so you may want to recalculate the size of your strips, okay? Now, when you do the feet, well, in this case, she's going to be up on her toes, but we'll give her a foot anyway. Now, here's why you have to kind of custom fit some of these, obviously. Because if I use a whole other strip there, she's going to look like she has a cast on her leg. It's probably going to be a little too beefy at the bottom. So you can always, when you get down to, you know, need a little bit more, you can like kind of customize a piece. Okay. So if you do this, you can actually give them a foot. And remember, they're not going to stand up on their own, but at least they will have a foot there. So you can take what's left, pull it down a bit, and just pull something forward a little bit. Okay. Now, it's not going to hold its shape yet. You can let that sit and go on to the next leg. When it's done, this will be stiffer, and you can then again just kind of bring a little piece forward, okay? We can always add on to that later, okay? But in this case, she would be up on her toe. Okay, any questions? And again, just don't forget the smoothing part. Get warm